Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Mark Medley Show. And yes, it is time for us to come together again, and I'm thrilled to be with you as I always am. And today's episode came about because of a speaker series that I attended on yesterday. And the speaker series was presented by Darryl Jacobs of ESPN Networks. He's a commentator on ESPN. Corey Fleming, the library director here in New Jersey. And the keynote speaker was Dr. Marcus Bright. And the impetus for his talk was from his book, Brighter Ways Forward, Reflections on Sports, Tech, and Socioeconomic, or shall I say Socioeconomic Mobility. It was a powerful talk, thus causing me to put together today's episode of The Mark Medley Show. So if by chance you don't know who you're listening to, this is your host of The Mark Medley Show, none other than Mark Medley. Thank you. I'm always so appreciative of your love, gratitude, and your applause. It is truly much appreciated. But as I said, today's show, the idea or the concept came to me from sitting there listening to and participating and dialoguing with Dr. Bright on yesterday. And we talked about this whole notion of reflections on sports, tech, and socioeconomic mobility because, one, Darryl, the commentator for ESPN, his whole life has been dedicated to sports in one form or another. He's been head coaches at various colleges. He's been commentating for ESPN for a number of years at all levels. But what Dr. Bright and what Darryl Jacobs was talking about was how can we, because so many of our children are so tied up with sports. They have all their eggs in one basket. Now, I see this on a daily basis because for any of you who have listened either to this podcast or if you've listened to my radio show, The Reading Circle with Mark Medley, you know I often reference my students. And over the years, I've been a principal now for 15, 16, 17 years out of my 23 years into the district. Over the years, I cannot tell you how many of my students have aspirations for being in the NBA or the NFL or MLB or the soccer league or the hockey league or what have you, something sports related. And the upshot of yesterday's talk was how do we capture that same kind of energy and desire and aspiration to become an athlete? How do we capture that for any other industry or any other field or any other career choice, particularly when our young people are making decisions about what they want to be when they grow up? And so many, particularly in urban areas, but not limited to urban areas, but with so many of our children, the aspiration is the NBA or the NFL. The question was posed yesterday, or the statement was made, there were more millionaires and billionaires made in the tech industry than it was in the NFL or the NBA. Now, I know for a fact on tomorrow when I go back to my school and I ask my students, which do you think created more millionaires, whether it's the NBA or whether it's the tech industry, they're going to say the NBA. This I know. But that was the point of the speech on yesterday was there is money to be made. There are opportunities out there in so many other industries and fields besides the sports arena. But they're not sexy. They're not glamorous. They're not always in front of your face. They're not always on the news. They're not like in March Madness or the World Series or the Super Bowl or the championship this or championship that. So the kids many of our young people, and even some of our parents, they gravitate toward what they see, which is a basketball game, or a football game, or a baseball game, or a soccer game, or a hockey game, or a tennis match, volleyball game, what have you. And so we had a wonderful dialogue on how do we get folks to understand that there's more out there in terms of career choices than just the sports arena. Now, for one thing, and this is the topic of today's conversation, because it came to me as I was sitting there in that session yesterday and as I was talking to someone on last night. And I have a great friend that every time I make this statement, he just falls over laughing. But then we both have to get together and say, it's sad but true. And the statement came from this. Each year I've actually had students who for the most part flagged the entire year. At best, FD, maybe a couple of C's here and there. Parent hasn't shown up to not one meeting concerning academics. And now comes the end of the year when it's graduation time and picture day, when we will get a room full of parents there with bells on. They will have cameras and balloons, and they will be hollering and shouting about my baby. And my baby, truth be told, didn't do anything academically all year long. The tuxedos and the gowns and this outfit and that outfit, this pair of shoes and that pair of sneakers, all to be able to take a picture, all the balloons and the flowers all over the place to celebrate something that really isn't. Because graduations and moving up ceremonies is about academic achievement. So the statement that I would always make to my friend is, there are too many of us all about the celebration, but not about the perspiration. So what do you mean by that, Mark? What that means is we're so focused, and this came up yesterday, we're so focused on the outcome. But what we don't look at is what it takes to get to that outcome. There's work that needs to be done to get to the outcomes that we desire, as no one is going to place the desired outcomes in our laps. You have to put the work in. Since my boys love basketball, I always try to tag my lessons, in many cases, to basketball. And we did a lot of looking and work at Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant had one heck of a work ethic. So I would run the various YouTube videos that are out there about Kobe, rest his soul, of his work ethic, where he would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to the gym, practice for 2 hours, come back home, eat a quick breakfast, go to school, come back home from school, do his homework, and go back to the gym for another 2 or 3 hours, go to bed, get up the next morning at 4 o'clock a.m. and do it all again. So I'll ask my students, are you willing to get up at 3 or 4 in the morning to go to the gym to work out? And many of them look at me like I have 3 heads. But that's the point I was trying to make, was Kobe was putting in the work. He was dedicated. He was faithful. He was putting in the work to get the desired outcome. So many people want to get the outcome, but they don't want to put in the work. They see the buzzer beater shots, not realizing how many times the player practiced that shot over and over and over again, thousands and hundreds of thousands of times, so that when the moment came, they would indeed be able to hit that buzzer beater shot. So as Dr. Bright was talking on yesterday, he was sharing how in his area of Miami, Florida, a lot of the tech industry moved there, that they kind of set out a goal to be the Silicon Valley of the East Coast down in Miami, Florida. And what he shared was they came there and so many people were not prepared to take advantage of the opportunity. Because what came across yesterday crystal clear was technology is the way of the future. If you really want to try to point your kids, particularly if they have an interest in it, in a way to go in terms of a career path that's going to make them an income that will be able to afford them the lifestyle that they want, then going into technology and artificial intelligence, also known as AI, is the way to go. But it takes preparation. It takes going to those classes. It takes going to school. It takes understanding and learning algebra and language arts and social studies and science and physical education and art and music and all of the other courses that are offered into the curriculum. We have to get students who are serious about their academics in order to get to where they would like to go. Even if by chance, because we don't want to kill the kids' dream of becoming in the NBA or the NFL, but even by chance, if you do make it to the NBA or the NFL, your career is pretty much done by around 33, 34, 35. Everybody's not going to be Tom Brady or one of the other folks who actually crossed over into 40 playing a professional sport. That is an outlier. That is not the norm. The norm career ends around 33, 34, 35, and then you still have to be able to do something beyond that. Not to mention, manage your money well that you make while you are playing. But going back to the title of the episode, there are too many who want the celebration with no perspiration. They do not want to put the work in, and that's the message that needs to get out. The work must be put in. You must be prepared for when the door is open for you. You can take advantage of the opportunity. Now, make no mistake, doors need to be open even when you are prepared. That you need to know somebody. Now, this is the thing. There's that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, I tell you what, who you know can get you in the door, but what you know is what's going to keep you there. My students know we have almost like a little daily mantra now that one student will lead it and the rest of them follow. And it's this: you get paid for what you know and what you can do. That's what you get paid for. So I'm trying to help my students now understand. Get everything you can get as much education as you can get so that you'll be able to do, so that you will know, you'll be able to get paid for what you know, you'll be able to get paid for what you do. Again, celebration without the perspiration is not going to add up because it's not coming in your lap. Victor Cruz, who played on championship New York Giants team, visited my school some years ago. And of course, the boys said, I'm going to the NFL. So Vic asked them a couple of questions. He says, well, first off, do you know any NFL players? No. Do you play on a football team? No. Do you work out with weights? No. So after going down this line of questioning for a little bit, Victor looked at the child and said, well, how do you expect to get to the NFL? And see, that's my point. All celebration. Oh, my baby. Oh, the balloons. Oh, the pictures and all the accoutrements that look like someone who actually has put in the work, when at the end of the day, they have not. The same thing kind of holds true because in the session yesterday, a young lady brought up this whole notion of us purchasing products and things for our self-worth. For us to feel good about ourselves, we have to have the latest pocketbook or the latest sneaker or the latest car. We have to have all these things, and we don't have really what it takes. But we put on, again, this mask, this show. And what Dr. Bright said is things only have the value that you give to them. So when you start talking designer names, when you start talking, designer cars and all this, that, and the other, it only has value because you give it value. That if you chose, and which I happen to be one of those who choose not to give designer names value, if you choose that it does not matter, then it does not matter. The only time something designer becomes a thing is when you make it that. So we even talked about that on yesterday during this session. We talked about how we had to have infrastructure in place. We had to have folks who would work together so that we had an infrastructure. We would have to have folks that work together who would be the door opening committee. And then we would have folks that would have to come together to be kind of like the cheerleading committee or the inspiration committee. They would have to be the one that are cheering people along. Yes, baby, you can do this. Yes, you can do this. And mean it for real, not just to be able to have balloons and pictures whenever all your report card, all of it was straight F's and straight D's. All celebration, no perspiration. There is nothing that you're going to get in life that you don't have to put the work in. See, everyone loves Michael Jordan and now LeBron James and at the time Kobe Bryant and all these other, Larry Bird and all. But what folks did not know was Larry Bird was at Boston Garden counting nails on the basketball court. He knew that when the ball hit the floor at a certain angle, if the ball was here, if he was there, he knew what the ball was going to do coming up off the floor because he had gone up and down that court bouncing the ball from this angle and that angle. Folks didn't see that. They only saw the shot going in with 1 second left. And feels as if anybody could have done that. And truth be told, there was a lot of work put in. My basketball team at my school, we were in the first round of the playoffs. I walked into the game. The score was 20-10 with about 7, 8, 9 minutes left. In all honesty, as I walked in and I saw that, I said, oh, we don't have our prayer. But when I tell you my Lions, because we're the Young Men's Leadership Academy Lions, when I tell you our Lions played with some heart, they played with some heart. They came back and tied the game 20-20, and then they kept going back and forth until ultimately it was a buzzer beater shot that ended the game with the opposing team. The ultimate score wound up 27-25. The score was 25-25 with like 3 or 4 seconds left. And the opposing team took the ball down court, made the shot, the game was over. But my point in sharing that story is the heart that those boys showed to come from that deficit of 10 points. They played defense. They stole the ball. They hit foul shots. They hit jump shots. To get back to 2020 and then to jockey back and forth and to ultimately lose by that 1 point, I saw my players exasperated. I saw players crying. And we were steady saying, you played with heart. You had nothing to be ashamed of. Well, can we play with that same kind of heart in our algebra class? Can we play with that same kind of heart in our language arts class? Can we play with that same kind of heart with our social studies and all the rest of our classes and things that we go to? Because at the end of the day, what you want to be able to do is tie that to your end. So, and where Darryl and Dr. Bright was going yesterday was, if you're really smart, you will kind of really take a look at this technological area, the coding and the development of these various games and artificial intelligence and both of them are athletes, both of them are sports fans, both of them said there is absolutely nothing wrong with sports. It was not their intent to bash sports. It was not their intent to make somebody feel bad for having the aspiration of wanting to be a professional athlete. That was not the intent. It was the intent to help folks understand why we must come up with a way, as he said, in terms of socioeconomics. If we are going to have any kind of socioeconomics at all, we're going to have folks in place who are making decisions and who are making money. That's the bottom line. They're making decisions and they're making a decent wage and income. We must get away from this celebration with no perspiration. We must get away from looking at an outcome, wanting an outcome, a positive outcome, and not wanting to put in the work. We've got to get away from ascribing our self-worth to a brand name. We've got to get away from ascribing who we are based on the sneakers on our feet, or the car that we drive, or the clothes on our back, or the bag that we carry. We've got to get away from that and really understand and get into the things that matter. I truly enjoyed the session yesterday. I don't even like the word enjoy, because it wasn't about my pleasure and my enjoyment. It really was about education, being insightful, enlightened. Because, see, I have a hard time with this whole notion of enjoy. When people go to church and they tell the pastor they enjoyed the sermon. Well, it wasn't really there. And I'm not saying we should not have a good time, but it wasn't necessarily all about just enjoyment. And sometimes we need to be enlightened. We need to be inspired. We need to be educated. And enjoyment is good, it is. But we got to move beyond enjoyment. The session yesterday was educational. The session yesterday was powerful. The session yesterday was enlightening. And the challenge for all of us who was there was, how do we move it beyond dialogue and into action? How do we get school-age children to look beyond just the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball and the soccer league and so forth? How do we get folks to be just as excited about becoming an engineer, a mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer? How do we get kids just as excited about doing something in the technological field, in the industry, in the Silicon Valleys of the world? My daughter is in cybersecurity. And that's information management, information intelligence, cybersecurity, and all that. That's an up and coming field as well. She prepared herself for it, and she's doing very well in it. She has a master's degree in cybersecurity. So how do we get kids positioned to look at those type of positions in addition to the NFL and the NBA? Because if you do the math for the NFL and the NBA, the numbers that each professional squad or team that they carry, and all the children playing basketball around the world, because the leagues at one point only recruited from the United States. Now they're recruiting worldwide. So the competition to get on a 12-man basketball team or 14-man basketball, or 60, however many is on a basketball team, it's less than 20. To get on a team, and they only release one or two people, or draft one or two people a year, the chances of that is extremely, 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 extremely slim. However, the chances of you, if you really buckle down and sacrifice and study and do what you need to do to become something in the tech industry, an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor, I hate to go on there because there's so many other careers that the children can pick from other than the ones that we just know. I mean, there's an occupational or a career guide that, is probably at least 2 feet thick. It's probably 24 inches thick or more, with tiny print that's loaded with all kinds of obscure and unheard of occupations. Well, I think that's about it for today, but I can honestly say it was really wonderful meeting Dr. Marcus Bright on yesterday. I already knew Darryl Jacobs. Darryl was presenting this as a speaker series. He said there's more speakers to come. I am looking forward to meeting those speakers as well. But I am going to read Dr. Bright's book, Brighter Ways Forward: Reflections on Sports, Tech, and Socioeconomic Mobility. I'm also going to have Dr. Bright and Darryl be a guest on my radio show, because as I share with you all the time, the podcast and the radio show are two different platforms. The radio show is heard worldwide on Saturday morning. It is streamed on gobrave.org. It is heard locally in the northern New Jersey on old-fashioned FM radio 88.7 FM. The show is on from 6 o'clock a.m. to 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday mornings. The podcast can be released pretty much at any time I feel like recording something, as I do it today based on the events of yesterday. So the podcast is available on just about every major podcast platform that exists. There might be one or two that it's not on, but all the majors, they're there. The podcast is there, whether it's iHeart, whether it's Pandora, whether it's TuneIn, whether it's Stitcher, whether it's, you go down the podcast list. The Mark Medley Show is there. So there's a couple of ways you can get a hold of me in terms of my various platforms. There's the podcast, The Mark Medley Show. There's the radio show, The Reading Circle with Mark Medley. There's the blog, The Critical Thinker. But I'll tell you what, let me tell you how you can get to everything, my social media sites and everything. just log on to markamedley.com. MarcAmedley.com. MarkMedley.com, that is the hub. It'll take you everywhere, all my social media sites, my musical recordings, the radio show, the podcast, what I do on my day job, quote unquote. Everything is on the website. So log on to markamedley.com and we will be together again on our next episode of the Mark Medley Show. Or if you tune into the Reading Circle with Mark Medley, I'll catch you there on Saturday mornings. Have a great rest of whether it is your morning, day, or evening when you're listening to this.